Hello, today's lecture will be titled Tense Equals Time, and it is an exploration and expansion of the 14 verb tenses in English for our LA 103 course, Unit 1, and it does go with the chart on pages 69 to 70. An overview. In English, there are 14 verb tenses. The different tenses can be broken into three groups. The past, which includes 4 tenses, the present, which includes about 5 tenses, and the future, which also includes about 5 tenses. Using the tenses accurately makes it easier for the reader to understand not only when something happened, happens, or will happen, but also makes it easier to understand the connection between the events within a paragraph, within a story, within an essay. Today we will begin by exploring the past and then the present and finishing with the future. There will be comprehension checks along the way, so be sure to take notes either on a separate piece of paper or on a separate document. The past tenses are used to discuss events that occurred at some point in the past. The first one is the simple past, followed by the subject. Okay, so the subject, S just means a subject. So it's I, you, he, she, it, we, they. It can also be a noun, like a proper noun, like New York City or somebody's name. And then the past tense verb form. Then there's the past continuous. So sometimes people might call it the past progressive, which is subject plus was or were, and then verb ing. The past perfect, which is not as common, but this is the subject plus had, and then the past participle, which is also known as the third form of the verb. For example, in the verb go, the past tense is went, and the past participle is gone, G-O-N-E. And then there's the past perfect continuous, aka the past perfect progressive, which we use with action verbs, and it typically is subject plus had plus the past participle of be, which is been, and then the verb ing. The simple past is our first tense to cover for today. The structure for a positive sentence would be subject plus the past tense verb form. To create the negative, it's subject plus did plus not plus the base verb form. Please note, the auxiliary verb do is changed into the past, did, so that took the tense, so you don't need to change the base verb form into the past. And then you're using the adverb not to create the negative with did. Okay, so the simple past is used to discuss events or things that happened in the past. It can be used with both static, non-action, and action verbs. Static verbs imply they do not involve action, such as hate and like. Action verbs imply movement, such as play and run. Let's look at 2 examples. I drove to the lake. You drove to the other lake. So notice how the form doesn't change no matter what the subject is, unless you're working with the be verb, where I takes was and you takes were. Creating the negative, I didn't walk to the cinema. He didn't walk to the park. Notice how the auxiliary helping verb do is shifted to the past did plus the adverb not, and then the base verb form walk. Okay, so it's not going to be ed here. Often goes with past time phrases, like on July 21st, 1980, or when I was a kid, or in April, or in last year. More examples. We were in New Orleans last August. Notice how that be conjugation is not was, but were. This is important to see. Or, I studied geography when I was a freshman in high school. Notice how the dependent clause is also in the past. When you're creating a complex sentence and the independent clause is in the past, the dependent clause should also be in the past, which is not the case in future tenses, but we'll get to that. Question formation in the simple past. For yes or no questions, you begin with the auxiliary verb did plus the subject, and then the base verb form. Example, did you see the sky last night? Short answer, yes, I did. Or to create a WH or an H question, so that's a question that can start with what, when, why, where, who, and then or an H question like how often, how much, how many, or just how, plus the auxiliary did, then the subject, then the base verb form. For example, how did you do on the exam? Or why did you say that? I said that because I wanted you to understand the complexity of the artwork. And notice in this dependent clause, starting with my subordinating conjunction because, I do shift that verb tense into the past. Now I put an asterisk here because there are a few other question forms that arise in English, which will be addressed in a future lesson. Our first comprehension check. So please answer this question. Which sentence exemplifies correct be verb conjugation, change, according to the subject? So in other words, what is the correct form of the verb be? Is it A, yesterday we was in Miami, or B, yesterday we were in Miami? Pause the video, take a minute, and try to answer the question to the best of your ability. Welcome back. Our next verb tense is going to be the past continuous. So for this one, we've got subject, and then we choose either was or were, which are the two past tense forms of the be verb. It does depend on the subject. And then verb with an ing ending. To create the negative, it's subject plus was int, so that's was plus not, or weren't, so that's were plus not, plus the verb with an ing ending. The past continuous is used to describe actions that started, took place over a period of time, and ended in the past. Typically, so that means most of the time, only action verbs are used in the past continuous. Examples: I was writing an essay yesterday afternoon while you were playing piano. Notice we're starting with that subordinating conjunction while, followed by the subject you, and then the past part. Past continuous, were playing. Also, notice how both actions and both clauses took place over a period of time simultaneously. That's why we're using while at the same time. They started, progressed, and finished in the past. Often accompanies a past time phrase. For example, yesterday, in 2008, last night, 3 years ago, etc. These can be called adverbial phrases of time too. More examples. The artist wasn't drawing. Notice how that be conjugation is was because the subject is the third person singular. The subject is the artist. There's no S on the end. If there was an S on the end, it would be weren't. The artists weren't drawing, but it's a singular, so it's wasn't. Or the cows were running down the mountain when you looked away. So notice how the dependent clause is in the simple past, when you looked away. That means the continuous action was happening before you looked away. Question formations, was or were plus subject plus verb ing. This is for our yes or no question in the past. Example, was Sam performing in the play A Tale of Two Cities? Yes, he was. Or a WH or H question begins with those WH or H question words, plus was or were, plus the subject, plus verb ing, plus the punctuation mark, the question mark. I was studying yesterday at noon. Or, how were you doing? I was doing well. Comprehension check number 2, fill in the blanks with the correct verb forms in the past continuous. Pause the video, take a minute, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We're going to be moving on to the past perfect. This is our third verb tense in the past. Subject plus had plus past participle. That is the third form of the verb. To create the negative, subject plus had plus not. You can also use never plus past participle. We use the past perfect to describe an event that began and finished in the past. Often goes with before or after time phrases. It can be used with both static, that means non-action, and action verbs. Often used to emphasize, okay, that means stress, the completion of an action before another past action. Let's look at a couple examples. I had drunk all the coffee before you woke up. Notice how the first action was completed before the second past action. Okay, you woke up happened second, but before that, I can use the past perfect, had drunk, to emphasize that completion of me drinking all the coffee. Or the second example, before the class began, Henry had completed. the assignment to the best of his ability. So we're using the past perfect here to emphasize that completing the assignment occurred before the class began. 2 more examples. We hadn't thought of that before. Or the farmer had never picked the grapes before August. So this will come up in the past perfect continuous as well. When you contract or when you're saying a sentence like the farmer had never picked the grapes, you, especially when you're speaking it, it sounds a lot of time. You reduce the had so that it sounds just like a duh. So it might sound like this. The farmer had never picked the grapes before August. Or I had drunk. I had instead of I had drunk. I had drunk. Or Henry had completed instead of Henry had completed. So that's just a little pronunciation note to take notice of. And we're looking at question formation in the past perfect with a yes or no question. We start with had plus the subject, then the past participle, and then our punctuation mark is that question mark. Had, example, had Ken flown to Japan before July 21st, 2019. Notice the past tense, the past participle of fly is flown, okay? And then the short answer would be yes, he had. And then a WH or an H question word plus had plus subject plus past participle, then the question mark. Example, what did you say? What had you said before the show started? I hadn't said anything. Okay. Comprehension check 3, true or false? We use the past perfect to emphasize the completion of another act before another past action. Take a minute, pause the video, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. We will be moving on to our final tense in the group of past tenses, the past perfect continuous. So to form this for the positive sentence, we go with subject plus had plus been plus the verb ing. To create the negative, you put not between had and been plus verb ing. And we use it to describe an event or action that began and finished in the past. It often goes with before or after time phrases. Typically, only action verbs are used in the past perfect continuous. Often used to emphasize the ongoing action before another past action, time, or event. Examples, you had been reading the paper before you decided to make some breakfast. Notice how the first action was completed before the second past action, and how the second action is in the simple past. Or before you sang, Peter had been playing the motif on the guitar. And again, as I'm saying it, I'm going to reduce the auxiliary verb had down to just the duh, so it could sound like before you sang, Peter had been playing. Okay, Peter had been playing. More examples. We hadn't been doing our homework when you called, but after you called, we began working on it. And then the final example, Plato had been writing the words of Socrates before the trial began, and I'm going to reduce that verb had down to a duh, Plato had been. So when I say it, I don't necessarily enunciate that had auxiliary verb. To form the questions, for a yes or no question, you start with the auxiliary had, then the subject, then been or been, plus verb ing. Example, had Ron been considering the solution before you came up with the answer? Yes, he had. Or a WHH question, we start with the WHH word plus had, then the subject, then been, then verb ing. Example, when had you been planning to visit Japan before the virus hit? I had been planning to visit for spring break, but I was derailed because of the pandemic. Comprehension check 4. Okay, so this is going to be tough. I want you to complete the sentences with the correct verb forms. Now, in some cases, more than one past tense verb approach is possible. Okay, so pause the video, and you're going to use the 4 past tenses to answer this paragraph. And after this, we will move on to the present tense. If you have any questions, please write them down and I'll address them. You can also write them in the comments. Thank you.